Welcome back to another episode of 2DI. In today's episode I'm going to show you how easy it is to make your own rice wine at home. Okay, so what we have here is we have a large pot with our rice in. Now this isn't any ordinary rice, this is a glutinous rice, which you can buy from any good Asian supermarket. This is a Thai brand, but any type of glutinous rice will do. Glutinous rice has more sugar in it, and so better for the fermentation later on. Now, I've had this soaking overnight, but we also need to give it a good rinse with clean cold water before we start to steam the rice. Should just about do us. It's reasonably clear compared to what it was at the start. So what we have here is the steaming section of our pan assembly. So we're going to transfer our rice into here, and then this will sit on top of the pan, and then we put our water in, bring it up to a boil, and steam the rice. So we have our rice in the steamer, water in our pan, and we have a small portable gas stove. It's preferable to use gas because it's a lot easier to keep a constant rolling boil on the water. If you use an electric, whether it be ceramic, glass ceramic, or induction, it'll kind of power on, turn off, power on, turn off, and your heat will go up and down. So you don't really want that. You want to keep it as constant as possible. These little portable stoves you can pick up for about 30 euros from your local Asian supermarkets. Most of them seem to sell them, and then they just come with this little gas cylinder, which one of these is enough to probably do a couple of batches, as long as you don't leave it burning on full power all the time. Okay. So we'll put her on full power to start with until we can get the water up to a boil, and I will see you in a few moments. So now our water has come up to the boil, and our rice is now steaming. It's very important you steam the rice, you don't boil it. If you boil it, then you end up with rice pudding, basically. So whatever you do, don't boil the rice. It has to be steamed. Can't stress that enough. And it's going nicely. Give our rice a little stir. And it's looking good. So we have 1 kilogram of glutinous rice here that's being steamed. Leave a little hole in the middle. Make sure we can get plenty of steam up there through the hole. Okay, so our rice has been steaming now for about 20 minutes. So what we need to do is we need to pour over some hot water and give to help loosen it up and start it and sticking together so that the steam can get around the rice better and have a more even cook on it. So we'll do that now. So we have our hot water boiled in the kettle, prepared earlier. And we give our rice a good stir, try and get as much off the edges as possible that's sticking there. You'll know when your rice is cooked because it'll be more translucent in appearance. So we leave our little well in the middle there. Okay, so our rice has now been steaming for about 40 minutes now, so it should be almost done. Just going to pour over a little more hot water just to free it up a little bit, and then give it just another 5 minutes to finish steaming. Okay, so just pour over some more hot water. Give it a bit of stir, pull everything into the to the middle. Get it out from the sides. It's looking pretty good. It's going reasonably translucent, so we just need to give it a few more minutes, I would say, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so our rice has now been cooking for about 45 to 50 minutes and it's going pretty translucent. So it's time to turn off the heat, and we'll need to tip this out onto the work surface, spread it out as thin as possible and allow it to cool. This bit is a little bit on the dangerous side because obviously this is boiling water and it's very, very hot, so be very careful, don't burn yourself. Now the pans are going to be very hot, so use a cloth for this part. And what we need to do is just gently tip out the rice onto our clean work surface so that it can cool down. We just need to get something to get in there and to scrape that off. It's a bit hard around the edges. We don't want to waste any of our rice. So we need every grain we can get. Okay, so spread it out. The sooner you spread it out, the faster it'll cool down. And that is our rice. So we need to, as I said, let it cool before we can proceed any further with making of our wine. Okay, so now our rice is cooled down. What we can do is we have to add our yeast, but it's not just yeast or on its own. We're going to add our dried yeast cakes. So these are a combination of rice and a type of mold that's going to break down the rice into sugars that the yeast can then ferment into alcohol. You can't just add standard yeast to rice because it will just do nothing. It has to be broken down, and these you can get from the local Chinese supermarket. Just ask for dried yeast cakes. I usually use two of these per 100 grams, but it's not an exact science, so I'm just going to use 4 here. And you need to grind them up in a mortar and pestle. You need to make them into a fine powder. Okay, now we've got that ground up, you get a spoon, and what we're going to do is just sprinkle that over our rice. You need to get in there and turn it over, get it all mixed up. Now this bit, it helps to have wet hands because it will stop the rice sticking to you. And just get in there and mix the powder in with that rice. Okay. Okay, so we have our 10-litre barrel here. So this batch of rice will make about 10 litres. There a second. Now this has all been sterilised beforehand, and of course because this is a solid we cannot take a gravity reading to start with, so the best guess alcohol content maximum is probably going to reach is around about 20%. What we're going to do is we're not going to add any sugar at the moment. We're just going to use just the rice because we need it to break down, the mold to break down the starch in the rice, so that the yeast can then ferment it. And we're not going to fill the whole 10 litres, we're just going to put the rice in and then just enough water then just to cover the rice. So I'll put the rice in. Okay, so now we've got our rice and our water in there. We need to put a lid on, and then we need to put our airlock in. What I have in the glass here is just some sterile water. So it's the water that's been mixed with potassium metabisulfate as a sterilising agent. Keep the bugs out. And yeah, that should do it. And that is it. What we need to do is just leave that now to sit for the mold to do its job and to break down the starches and the yeast and the gluten into fermentable sugars. And then once that starts to happen, then we'll start seeing activity here as the CO2 is produced by the yeast. And it's going to take about a week for that to fully break down and start fermenting, at which point we can add some more water to bring it up to its full level, and also some sugar to give the yeast some extra energy to turn it into alcohol, because we want this about 20%, close enough. It'll have a good kick to it. So yeah, the whole process is going to take about 3 or 4 weeks, so I'm guessing I will see you in a few weeks' time, in which case then we will have some rice wine to drink. welcome back, and through the magic of video editing, it's now several weeks later and our rice wine has had plenty of time to ferment and settle. This is what our rice wine looks like after it's finished fermenting and it's been racked off into other bottles for settling. As you can see, you might be able to see there's just a small amount of sediment left at the bottom, but our wine is quite hazy. There's a lot of particles still floating in there, and let's see if there's any life left in that yeast. Maybe if you can hear this. Oh yeah, so there was a little bit of a pop there, so there's still a little bit of activity in there from the yeast, but not a lot. What I did after this stage was, after bottling into these 1 litre bottles, we put them in a pan of cold water and steadily brought its temperature up to around about 75-80 C, just to pasteurize the wine. And as well as pasteurizing the wine, it also has the effect that it causes a lot of the sediment that's still left in there to coalesce together to form bigger clumps, so bigger particles. So it already starts to clear, but you just get a lot more larger pieces of sediment. And so when you go to filter it, it makes it a lot easier to filter, because obviously the filter isn't putting through lots of fine particles, it's stopping all the bigger particles. And once it's been filtered and we've put some additional sugars in to back sweeten it, this is what we're left with. It's quite a nice colour. It's reasonably clear. There are still a few bits floating around which are obviously a bit too fine for the filter, but on a whole it looks pretty good. Obviously not as good as a commercial made wine, but nonetheless pretty good. Now I've back sweetened this with a little bit of molasses sugar, just to give it a little bit more of a caramelly taste, and it also, adds a little bit to the colour of the wine. So let's just break out a couple of glasses and let's have a sample. So as you can see, it's still quite murky, but it smells great. You can really smell the rice in there. Ooh, it's very, very sour. There's no sweetness in that at all. It is completely dry and devoid of any sugar. That's why it definitely needs back sweetening. And we moved on to our filtered and back sweetened. Okay, as you can see, the colour is a lot better. It still smells very ricey. Oh, and that's very sweet. I think I probably overdid it on the back sweetening a little bit on this one. You get the caramel notes coming through from that molasses, but yeah, it's very, very sweet. Maybe a little bit too sweet for my liking. So I hope you enjoyed that video on this video on how to make rice wine. I will probably do another rice wine making video in the not too distant future, but this time I'm going to upscale everything. So instead of making a 10 litre wine, I'm going to go for the big one and do a 30 litre barrel, because I have all the equipment here. But obviously steaming that amount of rice, because the most you can do in the steamer I have is about 1 kilo at a time, and that takes about 45 minutes per kilo. So you're probably looking at, call that an hour with all the cleaning in between the stages of all the batches of rice. So yeah, 30 litres, so we're looking at about 3 kilos of rice. I think I've got about 3.5 kilos left in that bag. So yeah, I might as well stick the whole lot in. A little bit extra is not going to hurt. So yeah, so that's what, 3.5 hours just on steaming time. And then obviously got to let it all cool, so it's going to take a bit longer. And then yeah, we've already got all the rice cakes ready to go, so it should be a nice batch, and that way we can go more in depth into the process. So I mean, I can't really show you the stuff I'm fermenting because it's in a barrel, but maybe once we rack it off into our 5 litre demijohns, you know, I can show you a few different stages of the actual racking process, so you can get a better understanding of the whole process. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back with JR in the not too distant future for the next episode, and hope to see you then, and don't forget to like and subscribe.